Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As we discussed before the break, the staffing crisis on Rikers Island has resulted in a rapid escalation of violence and neglect. Here now to talk about it is Benny Bascio. He's the president of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Errol. Pleasure.
From your point of view, Mr. Bascio, what is the source of the crisis and what's the best way to fix it?
Well, look, the mayor hasn't hired correction officers in close to 3 years. And the reality is that the Commissioner Schiraldi needs to stop lying to the public about why people are out sick. You know, we have members that are suffering from all-time assaults from inmates. So they're recovering from assaults, long-term effects of COVID. You know, these are the situations that we're dealing with. And having no correction officers in over 3 years has created this staffing crisis. We've been sounding the alarm for quite some time. And the assaults on my members are through the roof. And this is what we don't have the luxury of working from home remotely. Like, we're recovering from stitches, broken bones. Like, this is a serious crisis that we're having right now on Rikers Island.
The fact that officers are not showing up, I know that you have what's called unlimited sick days. Your members do. Cops have the same thing, right? You don't have a limited number like somebody in my job would have. You have as many as you need. But if hundreds of officers are not showing up and some are not even calling in sick, that kind of behavior would lead to discipline for most of the people watching this program, or even termination. What's the best way to deal with that?
Well, AWOLs are, misleading as well, right? Because if you're working 25 plus hours, you're actually getting off when you're supposed to start your second, you're on a 4-day swing, you'll be starting your second. And you're obviously not going to be able to work that second day working. So they calculate AWOLs in that manner as well. So, working 25 plus hours a day, the human body can only take but so much. And they're responsible for this staffing crisis, right? So if anybody's under the impression that the sick rate isn't going to be high when they have us working that many hours, they're sadly mistaken. They created this mess, and now when you have no solutions to the problems, right? Because the jails are unsafe, and we need safety and security. So when you have no plan, now the commission is going on a media tour talking about it's our fault. We're being scapegoated. When we've been trying to get officers for quite some time now. Whose fault is it? Like, the union isn't in charge of hiring correction officers. That's the city's job. And if they haven't hired in almost 3 years, what do they expect to have happen right now? Inmates are suffering as well. They're not getting their minimum standards. This is where we're at. It's a crazy, unsafe situation with unmanned posts. Triple shifts are happening every day. In the hundreds of officers are working triple tours every day.
Well, but here's what I don't understand, Mr. Bascio. The federal monitor says that Rikers is both understaffed and overstaffed at the same time, meaning that there are roughly 4 officers for every 3 detainees, which is something like 7 times the national average. But that the manner of deployment is either inefficient or outright counterproductive.
But that's not true as well. Like that's ludicrous. Like when the commissioner said we had 9,000 officers at one point, right? And then he then says we have 8,400 staff members. The 8,400 is all uniform ranks combined. Correction officers are the ones that have to man the post. So right now we have 7,600 officers that have to man posts that are going unmanned. So, when you say not every correction officer is on tour at one time. So when they talk about those numbers, remember, we're a 24-hour operation. We have officers working 3 shifts. So no one's at work at the same time.
No, I get that. But if there's 7,600 officers at whatever rank, some are wardens and so forth, but there's only 5,800 people in detention right now. That seems, even if you divide it by 3, that seems like a very high ratio of staff to detainees. And again, if you compare it to Philadelphia, Chicago, LA, or any place else, they're doing a comparable amount of work with many fewer officers.
Well, they have a different setup, right? We have direct supervision where you need correction officers on post. I mean, when you have no correction officers on post because of the high amount of people that are out. But like I said, Errol, we don't have the luxury of working, injured behind the gate with dangerous inmates. Like there's a 23% increase since bail reform of inmates that are facing high felony charges.
Yes.
So we're not recovering from these assaults, and that's the problem. So you have to have a backfill of officers to be able to take over these posts after we're recovering from these I'm talking serious injuries, Errol, broken bones, and there's no consequences for inmates.
Well, yeah, let me ask you about that. I saw that you said something about these things happening with impunity. You just said something about no consequences. I thought the Bronx District Attorney had a unit on Rikers Island, and that people would be arrested and prosecuted basically on the spot if they committed new crimes, such as assaulting a correction officer.
Yes, Errol, you're right. There is an arrest unit on Rikers Island by the Bronx DA's office, and it's a joke because they are not re-arresting inmates. There's no consequences. They're dragging their feet. They make us come up with so much paperwork in order to do the arrest. And from what we're hearing, the Bronx DA is deferring prosecution. They're not even prosecuting some of these stabbings and slashings that are happening on Rikers Island. And you tell me, the whole system needs revamping. We need somebody as commissioner that knows what they're doing, that knows our system. The last 8 years, we've had commissioners come from outside agencies that don't know our system. And this is part of the problem that we're dealing with. Gross mismanagement, and the mayor hasn't helped us in the last 8 years. He hasn't even been on Rikers Island in the last 4 years. How about he come to Rikers Island and tour with me? Unscheduled. Let me take him to where he really needs to see. Because Eric Adams came. I got Eric Adams to tour Rikers Island, and he got to see for himself. Unmanned areas, inmates not receiving their minimum standards, and officers suffering.
Well, the mayor has about 100 days left. I'm not too hopeful that you're going to get that tour, but we will continue this conversation another time, and we'll wish you and your members a resolution and the best of health and safety. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Errol, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.